this. Okay, so here are our goals for this workshop number 1. First, we want to have an understanding of the difference between stressor and stress. Secondly, my hope is that we'll recognize the 3 stress responses. Number 3, understand the stress response cycle, because I'm a big fan of being empowered. And when we have information, we have power. And we won't be a victim to this biological response that we have that keeps us safe. And we can use it and sort of hack it so that we can be in control and empowered. And then finally, my hope is that we'll experience 3 mindfulness-based self-care techniques that we can do anywhere to manage our stress response at any time. So if you have questions or chats about that, feel free. But if not, we will move on. All right, so our first little exercise that we're going to do is going to take just a few moments. And I like to call this a soft landing. And I know that everyone's been working hard today, probably since before the sun came up. And so we're just going to do a little neck and shoulder release. Working all day, most of us are in front of computers, or we're texting, or we're in front of a classroom and we're reaching forward. And so we tend to get lots of tension in our neck and shoulders. And I can't see most of you, you have your cameras off, but I'm sure a couple of hands would go up if I said, do you have a tight neck, tight shoulders, in between those shoulder blades? Whew, that's where we hang.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so let's do a few things to help make that feel a little bit better. So sitting in a chair, maybe you're on a couch or wherever you are, we're going to put our feet firmly on the floor, and then imagine that we have this nice long spine, and I like to think of pressing the top of my head towards the ceiling, and then tucking my chin just a little bit and pulling my head back a smidge. And you might hear some snap, crackles, and pops in your neck and shoulders, and that's okay. So just taking a deep breath, we're going to inhale and pull those shoulder blades back towards each other in the back a little bit, opening the chest and the rib cage a little bit, lifting the top of the head, exhaling nice and gently. And we'll just take a look over our left shoulder or right, whichever way you started to turn is fine. And then again, turning over the other shoulder. Now you may notice some resistance on one side or the other. And we're going to honor that resistance, have some self-compassion here and not press past that, but just notice that there's a little tightness, little stress there, and just move slowly and patiently coming back to the center. Whew, I hope that gave you some relief right away. Next, we're going to bring our chin down to our chest, and you might see a lot of times we roll our head and we might roll all the way to the back, but we're not going to do that because that's a lot of pressure on those precious little tiny neck bones. So we're just going to roll forward and over to the other side. So ear towards shoulder, and we're just going to let the weight of our head help us bring that head, rolling it over side to side. And maybe one more time. And then the next time your chin is tucked towards your chest, come to stillness and just raise your head up. Great. And now for the shoulders, feel free to fix your hair, fix your clothes anytime. We're going to just lift the shoulders up, big inhale, and then exhale, press the shoulders down. Big inhale, lift the shoulders up. And exhale, shoulders down. One more time. Big inhale, shoulders up. And exhale, shoulders down. Finally, last move, just going to roll the shoulders around. Feeling those shoulder blades in the back coming up and down. Just roll. I bet you feel better already. I do. And bring that to a close. So let me know with maybe a little emoji sticker down there or just a sigh. I hope you felt better. I hope you feel better already. Let's see in the chat. Oh, for some reason, it's not coming up. But anyways, we will move along. So that's something easy you can do anywhere, even in the grocery store line. Nobody will wonder what you're doing. Maybe they'll do it with you. All right. So let's start with the information. And what's the difference between a stressor and stress? So our culture does not do a very good differentiating these two. And so I think it's really empowering to understand the difference so that in the next workshop, we can pull those apart, pull the stressors apart, and do an even better job in our own life of managing stressors. So a stressor is an event or environment, and this includes people, of course, that you consider challenging, demanding, threatening the safety of yourself and or the people and things you care about. Some stressors can be controlled and some cannot, and that's the topic of workshop number 2. Stress is the physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension as a result of exposure to a stressor. The experience of stress is caused by the biological function called the stress response. All righty, any questions or comments or thoughts about that? I'll give you a moment. All right, moving on. So in order for us to understand the stress response cycle a little bit better and to really pull apart stressor from stress, let's go on safari. So I know this is one of Carrie's favorite activities. So you are welcomed to really let yourself go in your imagination here. And we are all going on safari to Africa. So I've never been on safari myself, but my brother and my parents have, and they tell me it's a wonderful experience. And we've all gotten on this Jeep and we've got these wonderful safari guides and we're feeling really safe. And they take us out into the savannah and we see these beautiful giraffes.
I got everything separated.
Oh, someone is not muted, I think. There we go. So we see these beautiful giraffes and we cannot imagine not getting closer to them. So we ask our guides and they say, yes, everything's perfectly safe. Go ahead, get down off the Jeep and get closer to these giraffes. So we leave the safety of the Jeep. Maybe our heart starts to pound a little bit more. We've gotten a little bit of stress, but we're so excited about seeing these giraffes. So we get closer and closer and there's maybe 6 or 8 of us and we're just oohing and eyeing and feeling all this wonderful experience of being out in nature. And all of a sudden, one of us, we're not sure which one, goes and makes this sound. And instantly our hearts stop and we all look over in the direction of the sound. And what we see before us is this. Mama and Papa lion. And of course, we have a stress response. This is a stressor. Our lives may be threatened and we are terrified. So what happens? We have a stress response. Always, the stress response is to help keep us safe and to survive the day. Stressors create a stress response. And we have 3 stress responses. You want to guess at what they are? Anybody want to take a guess? I don't know why I can't see the chat. Oh, there it is. I'll wait for a moment. See? Take a guess at the stress responses. You know these. I know you know these. All right, we'll move on and I will show you. Let's see. So we've got the fight response. We've got the flight response. And finally, the freeze response. The freeze response is reserved for when we are feeling the most overwhelmed by the stressor. This is for the highest level of threat. So this is when we completely shut down. We may, like a gazelle being chased by a lion, play dead. All right, that was a lot of information. I feel like we went on safari. We have the idea of the 3 basic stress responses down. I'm going to wait a moment and see if there's any questions or comments about that. Oh, I want to go back. All right. We'll take our second mindfulness break. And this is, again, another opportunity or way for you to ground yourself. If you're feeling stressed, you start to feel that heart rate going, maybe sweat, you start to get sweaty palms, or just some anxiety starts to bubble up. This is a really simple and easy technique to use that you can teach to others. And I call it finding your feet. So once again, we'll just kind of softly land into our chair. And anytime I do this, I become shockingly aware of how often I am not embodied. I'm not in my body. I'm very much in my head.
I know.
And things will remind me to get back into my body. And this can be a really easy way to do that. So we're going to just either soften our gaze, and if you're watching Heidi, just sort of come into your body. If you like, you can close your eyes if that works for you. And just bring your attention to the very bottom of your feet. Take a breath. This can be a strange sensation at first to direct your attention to the soles of your feet. Slow everything down. Notice how you're becoming mindful of the pressure of the floor or your shoes on the bottom of your feet. Might be surprising to notice that you can feel the outline of your feet. Maybe wiggling your toes helps you to come a little bit more into that sensation. Maybe rolling your feet to the outside or to the inside. Maybe lifting your heels and feeling the weight going into your toes. And then rolling your feet down, lifting your toes and feeling the weight come into your heels. And maybe even noticing the muscles that are being used on your shins and calves to make that happen. And then settling your feet down again, and bringing your attention back to the soles of your feet. What do your socks feel like? What do your shoes feel like? Take a few deep, slow breaths here. All right. So I'd love to see what that maybe feels like for a couple of folks, if you're willing to share or write it in the chat.
This is Carrie. Does that have something to do with like grounding your feet into the earth and nature?
So another way that a lot of people will ground themselves is called earthing. And they'll take their shoes and socks off in all manner of weather and go out and find a patch of earth, whether that's grass or gravel, and actually connect with the feeling of the earth, maybe thinking about the energy of the earth, the gravity, so those types of feelings. That's particularly called earthing, but grounding can be used absolutely with earthing or the way that we just did it. Other folks might use the term grounding and just sort of concentrate on the chair that they're sitting on and how that feels in the back of their legs. You can use your sense of smell to ground, and it's really referring to being in the present moment. Our fear, fight, or flight, our stress response, that fight, flight, or freeze, really takes us into the moment, but in a hyper present way that is not good to be stuck in. And we're going to move into that in the next slide with the stress response cycle. But bringing yourself into the present in a grounding way where you're reminding yourself of safety, like we just did, or with the earthing, can be a great way to sort of halt that stress response, particularly if it's to something that isn't life-threatening. So in the example of being on safari and coming face to face with lions, we would want that stress response so that we'd have the adrenaline and cortisol and the extra blood that is created to get away quickly, to fight off the lion or the distress. But in our modern world, we're not fighting lions, generally speaking. It's maybe a deadline, or I'm sure, and we're going to have a chance to brainstorm some of the stressors that we face. But the brain doesn't know the difference between a perceived stress and a real stress. So that grounding activity can help us slow down. Sometimes I'll talk about going into slow motion mode when you feel that anxiety starting to bubble up. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, and this is the stress response cycle. For me, when I learned about this, it was one of the most empowering bits of information because it helped me to make sense of my anxiety, sometimes the depression that then followed with bouts of anxiety. And it has been something I've used to empower myself, my family, my coworkers, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to share it with you. So the purpose of our autonomic nervous system is to stay safe. Now, the autonomic nervous system controls all of the basic systems of our body, our breathing, our circulation, our digestion, our ability to fight off infection. So everything is controlled that we're not really thinking about by this autonomic nervous system. And its main goal is to keep us safe. We are wired to survive, not necessarily to thrive, but we are wired to survive. So safe is where we're always trying to get back to. When we encounter a stressor, like work, deadlines, lions, the pandemic, a natural disaster like hurricane or blizzards, and even traumatic events, those are the stressors in our life. Those stressors will kick off a stress response, that fight, flight, or freeze response. Again, there is a hierarchy with fight and flight being interchangeable to some degree, sort of depending on the experiences that we've had with varieties of stressors. And then that freeze response is really reserved for the highest level of threat. So many of us, I know myself, if I'd have come in contact with that lion, I probably would have had a freeze response because I know I'm not outrunning it, not flighting it. I know I'm not going to outfight it, but I could maybe freeze and hopefully they wouldn't be too interested in a dead heather. I don't know, but that would be my hope. But the highest level of distress is going to get that freeze response. That's going to create stress symptoms. Physically, emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally. This is where we think of that hijack, right? That hippocampus hijack. This stress response has hijacked, and everything in our system is going towards that stress response. So our digestion is halted. Our circulation is rerouted, and all of the blood is sent to the big muscles like our quads and our glutes, and sort of comes away from the extremities like fingers and toes. Cognitively, we're going to move from the prefrontal cortex to the back of the brain into the more, lizard-like, survivally wired brain that's going to just be thinking instinct. So we're going to move into instinct. And then emotionally, we're just going to be hyper focused on what we need to do next. So there isn't any capacity really for connecting with the people around us. All of our thought process, all of our emotional capacity is going to go towards surviving. So become very narrowly focused. And what we want to do to complete this cycle, because this is the natural cycle that we go through, is we want to do something to discharge that stress response. So cortisol, adrenaline is being dumped into the system to get us to prepare for that fight or flight. If we don't do anything, something, that's what's going to happen next, but we want to discharge that. So if we are running from the lion, that running discharges and completes the cycle. If instead the stress is a pandemic and every day we keep waking up to the same stressor that really doesn't have much of a way to wrap it up or manage it that feels like something we can do, we need to notice that we're having that response and find some way to complete the cycle. So that's where self-care, and that's going to be in our third workshop, comes more into play. But we've already experienced two ways. So releasing the tension in our neck and shoulders and the grounding and earthing that Carrie brought up, those are two great ways to manage this stress response cycle and help to bring it through to its conclusion. Exercise, connection, sleep, creativity. These are just some of the ways that we can complete the cycle. And we'll go into those in depth in the next workshops.
Hey, Heather, this is Carrie.
Yeah.
Are you going to mention how, with the tiger the tiger story, how someone running from a tiger and escaped that, how they would complete that stress cycle, going back to the caveman times? Remember you talked about that, and I was really able to relate to that. And it just really made it click in my mind.
Absolutely. So, the point is, if we had seen the lion in that situation, our autonomic nervous system would have very quickly diverted resources towards the response of fight, flight, or freeze. So we would have dumped the cortisol, dumped the adrenaline. Our lungs would have gotten much more, a lot more capacity. We'd start inhaling very deeply, because inhaling is part of the sympathetic nervous system, part of the autonomic nervous system. And our blood would be diverted to the large muscles in our legs, getting us ready to fight, flight. Freeze would be reserved for complete shutdown if we knew there was no way to survive but to play dead. And so when we're doing that fighting or flighting, we're using all of those resources that the autonomic nervous system has diverted to this stress response. So the cortisol would have been used up, the adrenaline would have been used up, the extra oxygen to the lungs would have been discharged, the blood that is now in those large muscles would be, being used, and digestion would have been stopped because we don't need it as we're running from the lion. But then when all of those chemicals and all of that rerouting has dissipated, then digestion comes back online, that emotional capacity comes back online, and we're able to connect and get back to exactly the spot of safety, right? That's always where we're trying to get back to. Our system is designed to get us back to safety. Does that help, Carrie?
No, but maybe you haven't gotten to it yet. Maybe that's the next part.
I must be missing something. You go ahead and take it.
I think you haven't gotten to it yet, so I'll wait.
Okay, if I get through and I haven't answered your question, come on back, because I feel like you know exactly what you want to say.
Okay, I'll wait.
All right. The problem happens is if we get stuck between the stress response and that discharge. So let's say, that lion scenario, we fight or flight our way out of there, we've completed the cycle. But if it's something like this pandemic and we're not recognizing the stress response and we're not completing the cycle with ourselves through self-care, this is where burnout and trauma can happen. So it's the little t trauma, but it's that stuck in that space between the stress response and the discharge or the completion of the stress response cycle. So that's why we want to learn these self-care techniques like grounding, like exercise, so that we are taking care of ourselves and completing that stress response. So there is good news in that we can use stress to our benefit, and eustress is good stress. So this was also surprising to me and empowering to consider the idea that some of our stress response actually, it was designed to keep us safe. And as this graph shows us, a little bit of stress actually increases our performance. And so the stress response in front of that lion, or the stress response to a deadline at work, can increase our performance. But then when stress becomes too high, so that lower arrow is showing us stress just increasing and increasing, then our performance level goes down, particularly if we're not completing the stress response. To really sort of get this into our bones, I'm wondering if we could brainstorm a couple of common examples of eustress. So places in your life or places that you maybe observe with your students or coworkers where a reasonable amount of stress is actually helping in performance. So you can use the chat or unmute yourself. It's fun to have a little bit of interaction.
This is Carrie. I mean, I'm not thinking of a specific example, but I understand what you mean with deadlines at work. I mean, if you're just very lackadaisical about it, you're not going to get the work done. But if you start to realize, oh my God, the deadline is coming up, and you feel that little bit of stress, that does help you get the job done. But when you overthink it or just get too stressed that you can't even do it, then that's when it gets past the point of eustress and to the distress.
Yes.
Like in your chart.
Absolutely. Any other examples? So I think that's a really good one, and it's one that we all come into contact with every day. Another one might be, you know, there's no milk in the refrigerator, so somebody's got to go to the grocery store. A little bit of stress. We know that it'll be a crazier morning if we don't have a gallon of milk, and so that causes us to do the job that we need to do and stop at the grocery store on the way home and get the milk. You know, I think if we all take a moment and think about it, there's lots of opportunities where a little bit of stress helps us to move forward, meet goals, make connections, you know, go back to school for that master's degree, or reach out to a friend that we've lost connection with through social media or something like that. The high school reunion is coming up, and so maybe that helps put a little bit of pressure on to lose a little weight or something like that, something we've been wanting to do for a while. We've got a chat. Let's see, irregular schedules or frequent school-related changes. So Jennifer, are you thinking that that is eustress, or that is more of like a chronic stress that is making it hard to manage your days? Because to me, irregular, yeah, both. So Jennifer says both. Right, so that sort of not knowing forces you to be a little bit flexible maybe, but that frequent, that idea of I never know what's coming. Yeah, not just here, also my daughter's school. That's a great example. And I think it's important for us to give credit and give some self-compassion to ourselves. I was talking to a coworker yesterday, and her son is autistic. They had this snow day. He understood that, but Monday and Tuesday were both snow days, and those are his days to go to school. And so now that means he's home for the whole week. And it was very stressful for the mom. It was very stressful for her son, and not knowing to plan for that created a sense of stress. And in just talking about it, you know, she asked me for a couple of tips, you know, how can I help? And I said, just acknowledge the stress and look for some of these creative ways to complete the stress response cycle. So if that means going outside to play, taking an extra, you know, hour to sleep in the morning, getting into a nice hot shower, any of the things that we find soothing for ourselves can help us to complete that stress response cycle. So acknowledging it, Jennifer, that's great. Acknowledging this is hard, that's self-compassion, and then finding a way to help yourself through the cycle. I tend to skip self-care and go through the cycle repeatedly and do the self-care much later. Yeah. So if you're skipping the self-care, you're getting stuck in that spot where the burnout happens. And it's sort of like we're just bouncing back and forth between more stress from the stressors, and then we're not completing the cycle and we're going back to more stress. It's really important to acknowledge and then find a way that's sustainable and accessible for us to complete the cycle. Yeah, the bounce back. Yep, you can just see it happening, right? Just right there in that space. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Cynthia. Yep, very true. So this is a little chart that's the stress response traffic light. And again, this just sort of helps us sort out stressors and the stress response that they create. So challenging stressors are, the common ones that create moderate stress response, including mild increase in heart rate, creative thinking, and a desire to connect and collaborate. So that's that eustress. It's a little bit challenging, but it forces us out of our comfort zone a little bit into that place of growth. Demanding would be stressors that feel problematic, like that never knowing what the schedule is going to be and need immediate remedy, immediate remedy. If without that remedy, it causes an experience of fatigue, overwhelm, anxiety, and frustration. So those are some of the symptoms, and we're going to dive into that in workshop 2. But those are the symptoms that tell us we're in that bounce back place. I'm going to steal that, Cynthia. I like that. And then threatening, this is that exposure to life-threatening stressors or chronic unresolved stress that results in panic attacks, exhaustion, burnout, and shutdown, that freeze response. So if we're experiencing these types of stress responses, panic, exhaustion, burnout, shutdown, then that's something that's become chronic and possibly traumatic. Understandably, actually this was news for me, the brain doesn't know the difference between real and perceived stressors. So right now we have coronavirus, this virus that is out there. I don't know about you, but when I left the YWCA on March 16th, I was certain that I'd be back in 2 weeks, and it's almost a year now. And I have to stop every once in a while and just take stock of how that is affecting me, how that's affecting my family, my coworkers, my friends, my community, and try to find self-care ways and creative ways, especially now that it's getting dark early and it's snowy. One of my favorite stress response cycle completers is to take a nice long walk out in the woods. Not so easy to do when it's getting dark at 4:30 and it's below 20 degrees. So finding other ways to be active and discharge that stress response is really helpful. It's empowering to know that our brain doesn't know the difference between this real threat of a pandemic or a lion or a deadline at work and a perceived one. So when we watch a zombie movie, it can just heighten the whole experience. It's just something to be aware of if you're like me and you're a catastrophizer. I'll go to worst case scenario right off the bat. I have to notice that stress response and help myself to complete that. And, this isn't real. It's not, I don't want to add to the stress I'm already feeling. So I take that, and what that does for me, how I apply that to my everyday life, is I'm really careful about what I expose myself to. So if I notice some of these stress responses coming up for me, I take a look at how much news I'm consuming, my social media feed. I look at, all of those things that my brain could perceive as making my immediate surroundings more unsafe than they really are. And then we've come to our final opportunity to practice a stress reduction, stress management technique. And this is progressive muscle relaxation and breathing technique. So this is, again, something that is very simple. You can do it at home, at work. My hope is that you're able to share this with someone And I've used this particularly if I can't get out to exercise, or if exercise isn't your thing. This has been evidence-based and proven scientifically to help complete the stress response cycle. And like I said, we'll go into more of those in our coming up workshops, but this one is something you can walk away with this afternoon and have in your toolbox. Before we do this, I want to make sure with Carrie that I got to the point that she was asking for. If not, Carrie, take it away. The floor is yours. Please give that information out, because I might have forgotten something.
This is Carrie. I was just talking about that whole story with the tiger, how the cavemen back then with the tiger, once they get rid of the stressor, the tiger's gone and they had all this stuff, how do they complete their stress response cycle? Remember you said they go back to their village and they talk about, remember you had that
Yeah.
whole scenario, just seeing how they complete their stress cycle.
Sure. You're jumping ahead of me a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Totally
Then never
fine.
mind.
No. It's great. It's great. We have a minute here. So I was sticking straight to the incident where, for that one-on-one where you're experiencing the stress response. But there's the idea that, so if in our caveman days, in our ancestry, if we experienced the lion or the tiger, and let's say we worked as a collective and we beat the tiger, maybe we got them and we run home to the village. So the fighting of the tiger, that discharged a lot of the stress response for us. The travel home, and then we tell our story. So that's another way to complete the stress response cycle. That connecting can be really helpful. And then there's that celebration. Maybe the village celebrates that the tiger has been taken care of and won't hurt anybody else. Maybe it was brought home as food for the village. There's going to be a celebration, and so there's more community being built. And this feast, so now we're refilling the system with good food and nutrition. And then there's sleep that comes. And so the victor gets a nice sleep and the whole community sleeps better because the threat has been taken care of. So that's just a bigger story about how stress manifests throughout our community, and more ways that we can complete that stress response cycle. So there's a chat, and that may have a little bit more. Let me read that chat, and I think we can connect these two dots. So Jennifer has a question about self-care. What is considered self-care besides exercise, sufficient sleep, and mindfulness-related exercises? Are resting and watching TV, reading books counted as self-care? 100%, 100%. So I'm glad. I knew these two things would connect. So you guys are getting ahead of me, which is great. My goal today was just to get the stress cycle to you, but it's also really important to get this information because you're charging ahead. So creativity is one of the ways that we can complete the stress response cycle, and not just our own creativity. So data is showing, and science is really revealing to us, that even when we participate in others' creativity, it completes the stress response cycle for us. So reading a book, which is completely creative, watching TV, absolutely creative. We lose ourselves in the story. We get that opportunity to calm down. So this is why binge watching Friends has become like the thing to de-stress yourself. It's very comforting. It feels very safe. And especially that re-watching is really interesting. The science is showing us that the reason we love it is because we know what's going to happen next. So right now in this pandemic, and as Jennifer was saying, I don't know what the schedule is going to be. Rewatching Friends, rewatching The Office, or my favorite, Downton Abbey, is very soothing because we know what the actor's going to say next, but it's also very creative. We are fully immersed in this other world where everything is safe and it's all wrapped up. So by all means, that is self-care for sure. Making sure you've got plenty of hydration, so that you're drinking water, tea, and any of those things are considered self-care, are going to help you move through the stress response cycle. Resting, yes. Resting, absolutely. It does not just have to be sleep. So resting can be having a nice conversation with someone, because that's also considered connecting, any kind of connection. So as long as it's not creating that perceived sense of danger. So this is why maybe you want to watch what you're doing on social media, because we can get into those texting wars, or those social media wars, and we're sort of banging on the keyboard and we're creating a stress response, or we're participating in a stress response. So just notice how that affects you, and connecting though, and feeling a part of something is an excellent way for self-care and to complete the stress response cycle. Carrie, better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. For sure. I didn't want to let all of my eggs out of the basket, but that's fine. I feel like that helped with folks to know that there are definitely lots more things you can do. Going to an art museum. So this is why it's been so great for MoMA and the New Britain Museum of American Art to offer these online looks through the museum. Just exposing ourselves to the creativity of our fellow men and women is very cathartic and brings us back together, brings us back to community, and really helps to de-stress and regulate our nervous system. There was one other thing I was going to mention. So I am offering yoga from the museum through the YWCA. So I will send that link to Carrie, and everyone that's coming to these workshops, I'm going to give you a free entry into that. Our next session is the 25th of February, and it's lovely because it's in front of this beautiful artwork by, now I can't think of her name, but this Chantel Martin. And it's beautiful artwork. To me, it looks like yoga. And so we do this very gentle yoga in front of the artwork. And we're in community. So we're hitting 3 self-care markers at the same time. Listening to music can be a wonderful self-care and stress cycle completer as well. Dancing. If you come up with some ideas, please put them in the chat and I'll share. So if everyone's interested, we'll give this progressive muscle relaxation breathing technique a try. All righty. I'm interested, Jennifer. Okay, definitely. That'll be great. I'll make sure that Carrie gets that link and everyone is invited. All right, so let's come back into that soft landing in your chair. This time it's up to you if you'd like to have that nice, long, tall spine, or if you'd like to just sort of lean back and let the chair support you. Totally up to you. Take one big, deep breath. And just like we did with the Find Your Feet exercise, we'll start at the bottom of our feet and with the lower muscles in our legs. And as we inhale, we're going to tighten the muscles of the feet and the calves. You might feel some of that come up into the upper muscles of the leg. That's okay. Just tighten those. And then as you exhale, release that tightness in the feet and the legs, and just feel it melt, that tightness just melt out of your feet. With your next inhale, tighten the muscles in the top of your legs and maybe your glutes as well, those muscles that are right on the seat of the chair. Tighten and take a big inhale. And then as you exhale, slowly release the tension in those big muscles in the legs. Excellent. We'll move into the abdomen, and sometimes the back these both work together. So inhaling, sort of pulling those abdominal muscles towards your back, maybe noticing that your bottom muscles tense up as well, trying to hold on to that, and then exhaling, releasing. Moving our way up into the chest and maybe a little bit into the shoulders. So inhaling, tightening through the shoulders and the chest, upper back, maybe your biceps too. Feeling that tightness. And then exhale it out. Just letting that stress go. And now dropping your arms by your side. As we inhale, we're going to make fists with our hands and tighten up all the muscles in the arms, all the way up to the biceps. Big inhale. And same thing as we exhale, just loosen all of that. Biceps, forearms, fingers, hands. And then coming into the shoulders and neck, we're going to inhale, bring the shoulders up towards the ears. Hold that. And then exhale, just release it down slowly, like you're melting through the shoulders. And then the last one, our face and the muscle or the skin around our skull, we're going to just tighten that up. I know it feels weird, but go ahead, inhale and scrunch up your face. And then exhale. Let that go. All right. While we were doing that, I thought of one more thing that I had wanted to mention. For completing the stress response cycle, self-care at home and at work, if you can create a little place of calm. So for me here at my house, we don't have a whole lot of space. So I have a little area on my desk that has a nice little vignette of figurines and things that I like and a plant that makes me feel really calm. And when I just kind of need to get away, I've got a little curtain that I pull and I go down there and I just sort of look at my little calm area and take some breaths. And with practice, all I have to do is go down there and look at my plant and my breathing starts to calm. And that's become my little quiet place. At the YWCA, we've created a staff quiet room. So we took a little room that wasn't being used. We added a zero gravity chair and a little Zen garden and a noise machine. And staff can sign up for 15 minutes at a time once during their day. And they can go in there and just relax and de-stress and maybe listen to a meditation. And that's become a really nice thing for them and a place for them to complete that stress response cycle. Jennifer saying, what is your recommended frequency of the breathing technique? I would say at least once a day to begin with, just sort of practice any one of those techniques. So the shoulder and neck release, the grounding through the feet, or that tensing and relaxing. The goal is to make it so it's almost reactionary. You start to feel anxiety or feel that overwhelm, and you can drop right into that place of the deep breath, the feeling your feet. If it's anything else that, going into that calm place, the practicing makes it a habit and it makes it super accessible no matter where you are. It does take some time because it is a practice that you want to get better and better at. If you find, a lot of people saying, oh, meditation, and meditation is great, and I have a personal meditation practice. I have had much better success with a practice that is less strict about having no thoughts. And instead, I just sort of let my thoughts come and go. And the way that I manage it is there's a thought. I don't need to chase it. I don't need to engage. It can just float on by. And that has been much more helpful for me than trying to chase that idea of having no thoughts in my head. That's never going to be me. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but I'll toss that in there. If you struggle with clearing your mind, it's a lot easier to just practice non-engagement. Do we have a closet somewhere at CGEC for this? Yeah, so that might be something that you all as a cohort wants to look at and find a little place to make a calm space. So that's all my information for this workshop. I would love it if you're so inclined to maybe unmute yourself and give me a a hello or a comment or a question? We've got a few more minutes.
Heather, do you want to close down the PowerPoint and let people open up their videos?
That'd be great. Thank you. There
I think you need to unspot. Oh, there we are.
I can unspotlight me. Great. We'll keep Heidi spotlighted. She's used to it.
And this is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
So for a beginner, in terms of practicing the breath work, what is the outcome? You know, if I continue to practice this and do it more often, is that the best idea for right now, you know, or will I be exhausted after I try it just one time? Is that why you're saying once a day, or what do you say for that?
That is such a good question. I wouldn't expect that you'd be exhausted. The intention is to calm yourself and to regulate your nervous system. So the reason why a lot of mindfulness technicians and teachers will go to the breath first, it's obviously super accessible. It's with us all the time. And it's really one of our only systems that's connected to both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic parts of our autonomic nervous system. There's also a vagus nerve, but we're not going to get into that. That's kind of too big for what we're doing here. But as you inhale, you turn on the sympathetic part of your nervous system, which is getting you ready for fight or flight. As you exhale, you're going into the rest and digest, or tend and befriend, which is the which is the parasympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system. So the breath is connected to both of those. So practicing regulating our breath really helps us to tone the entire autonomic nervous system. So we're inhaling and our heart rate is lifting up a little bit. And as we exhale, the heart rate lowers a little bit. And the newest science is telling us that it's that heart rate variability that is one of the best indicators of physical and emotional health and ability to regulate ourselves. So it's a great practice. I wouldn't expect you to be exhausted. Frankly, you can do it as many times as you want. I'm sort of do it all day. As I've practiced, I've noticed that I've become better and better at noticing when I'm starting to move towards dysregulation, which is kind of just not being able to control my emotions, or, you know, the objective isn't to not feel our emotions. The objective is to be able to manage ourselves through them. We want to feel our feelings. We just don't want to get hijacked by them. So that breathing practice can be just extraordinarily powerful in helping us to have, you know, contact with a stressor. Let's say it's, you know, a particularly difficult interaction with somebody at work. Maybe it's a student, maybe it's a coworker. And even before the conversation starts, you start to feel that sort of bubbling up of, oh gosh, oh no. If we go to the breath and we start to lengthen the exhale, we'll automatically bring the heart rate down, which will automatically bring the blood pressure down and will help to regulate us. Does that help to answer the question, Jennifer?
Yes, most definitely. Thank you so much. This has been very helpful.
I'm so glad.
I definitely need to work on self-care. I am not good at that.
Okay, so let me say this. A lot of people are really not good at self-care because we've been told it's selfish, right? Here's the thing. If you don't take care of yourself, somebody's going to have to at some point. When we heal ourselves, we're healing the world, right? We are not unimportant. The more healed we can show up, the better off everyone around us is going to be. And this is about sustainability. We need you to do the hard work that you're doing in a sustainable way. And someone who's burned out, someone who is in a constant state of trying to catch up with their emotions, or is unable to feel because they're in like that freeze, they're just shut down. That is no benefit to the collective. And eventually, someone's going to have to take care of you. Whether that lack of self-care has turned into chronic illness, chronic pain, burnout to the point where you can't go to work, or you're just not showing up for your family, it is not in anyone's best interest for you to neglect yourself. And I know that that's hard. That's a big shift, especially for people in the helping professions, right? We want to help. I'm here to help. But you're not going to be any help to anyone if the care and management of you has now been offloaded to somebody else because you didn't manage it. So I'm asking you to turn it around. Instead of seeing it as selfish, see it as a main responsibility of your life. I hope that's not too heavy, but that's where we're going. We got there already. We'll just keep going there.
Yeah, this is Carrie. It's all about just taking that time, just doing it, setting up a schedule, for doing the breathing. Set up a schedule every hour, every whatever. But you're right. The more you practice it, the more you start to know when you need it, and it becomes just automatic habit.
Mm-hmm. And spending the time with the breath and spending the time. So what that's technically called is interoception. So we're spending some time being embodied, right? We're in our body. And that helps us to start to develop this skill of noticing. And that's what mindfulness is really about. And before I started this practice, I would go through my whole day and not notice anything. I didn't notice my facial expressions. I didn't notice if I was cold or warm. I hardly noticed if I had to go to the bathroom. And I was a curmudgeon. I would have, nothing left when I got to the end of the day. And my theory then turned into I've got to hoard all of my compassion and hoard all of my patience and hoard all of my care and mete it out so that I have something left for myself, right? What I learned is that the exact opposite is true. If I start with myself, then I have this unending, sustainable resource of all of those things that's available to me. I don't have to parse it out in little pieces. I don't have to make these little micro decisions about who deserves my compassion today. If I start with giving it to myself, practicing it towards myself, then it is this completely renewable resource that just, listen, I'm trying to figure out the science of it, but it really just happens. And it's about noticing, practicing the noticing.
Yeah, I need more help with that.
Come to the next workshop. We'll work on it. Any other thoughts? I'm just loving seeing people's faces. Hi, Maria. Hi, Renee. Hi, Jennifer and Callie, Cynthia. Hi, Jeff.
I just wanted to say thank you to you, but also to Heidi, who's doing an amazing job interpreting today.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up then. It's just so lovely to see all your faces. Know that this may have kicked up some stuff for you. And so you may feel a little like, whoo, this afternoon. So take some time to rest, to digest, to breathe. Carrie, please feel free to share my contact information with everyone who came to the workshop. Folks, please hear me. If you have questions, concerns about anything you heard or anything that kind of kicks up for you, please reach out to me. I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to help. This is a resource from the YWCA. We really want to help heal our community and build resilience as we continue to go through this pandemic and forward. All righty. So
This is Jennifer. Where is the YWCA? Is it East Hartford, West Hartford? Where are you located?
Okay, so I think Jennifer is thinking about the YMCA, which is also a wonderful organization. But I am at the YWCA in New Britain. And again, Carrie has all my contact information, and we do have a little fitness area and we have classes. Carrie, I'm also going to offer everyone who came to the workshop a free week of membership. Okay, so particularly the online classes. So I teach at 7 a.m. on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays is yoga, and Wednesdays is Pilates. I also do a 9:15 yoga on Wednesday mornings, a chair yoga, and we can even, if you all want to do some yoga, we can manage that as well, some chair yoga or some. And I'm a trauma-informed instructor, so my yoga is very accessible and trauma sensitive. So Carrie, we'll work on a whole package of stuff that we can offer to participants. Okay. Great.
Yeah, I'll send out an email to everybody once you send me that invitation to the museum yoga, and I'll send out all that information to everybody.
Brilliant. Yep. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have anything before I thank Heather? Thank you so much, Heather. Heather is a friend of mine, and I love Heather. Thank you so much.
I love Carrie.
You are very healing for us. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for being part of my community. Take care, everyone, and I'll get that information out to Carrie this afternoon.
All right, and hopefully you can all join us for session 2.
Yeah, and invite anybody.
Yeah, anybody can come. We'll have this recording available for them to watch to get caught up so they can join in session 2.
Terrific. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Heidi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Carrie, good?
I'm muted. There we go. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I jumped ahead.
I don't know. Oh, it's fine.
But I just remembered that closing up that story, it just really clicked in me with the, remember I told you about the car when I would be driving and I'd almost get into an accident and I would feel that, and then I would start to like shake, and then I would go into work and want to talk about it. It's like, that's how I completed the cycle, but you'll get more into that next time.
Well, and I think it'd be great if you want to consider sharing that story, because it's so relevant.
Yeah.
It's nice to have other people talk. So I'll ask you if you don't mind to share that story.
It was an actual physical response. So
it is.
Yeah.
And that's why that progressive muscle relaxation technique works, because that's actually what happens. We start to shake, we tense, and then we shake it out. So if we can learn to control it, then it can be super helpful. Yeah.
Oh, this is wonderful. I just wish more people could have joined, but I'm so happy for the people who did join. So
me too. And I think they got a lot out of it. So maybe they'll invite others.
Yeah, good.
All right, my dear friend, I'll send you that stuff. Bye-bye.
Bye.